Welcome to SORMAG's Writers Cafe, where we share the real writer's life over a cup of friendship, sprinkled with laughter and wisdom. My name is LaShaunda Hoffman, and I'm your host. This episode's sponsor is Tickle My Tummy by Ann Clay. Sitting at the cafe with me today is Timothy McCann, Cynthia Rose, and Aziza Sphinx. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
Hello.
All right, you know how I start. I love to see what's going on with the authors right now. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your current book, and hopefully give us a little excerpt. And we'll start with Timothy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much to the invitation to the Writers Cafe. I feel like getting me some peach cobbler or something and just chatting it up. But, thank you so very much for the opportunity. My name is Timothy McCann. I have been, my first novel came out way back in the olden days, back in 1997, 98. And the name of that book was Until. And by the grace of God, it was published and became a national bestseller with HarperCollins. We wrote 3 other novels that was published nationally. And then I took a little break. The writing business changed a little bit, but truth be told, I changed a little bit. And I went into, I was a single father at the time, and I spent more time with my kids because they were growing up. And I also went into the ministry and planted a church. Well, fast forward to 2020, as you know, this COVID and everything in the world was going crazy, and I started to listen to a calling that I had in my heart for quite a while, and that was to write another book. I had resisted it, and a friend of mine said, Tim, maybe you should just journal. And I thought, no, I don't want to journal. And I found myself pulling my computer out that night and journaling, and the book and that journaling started back in, May, like the first week of May, became a full-fledged novel, and that novel will be coming out on November the 28th. The title of the novel is Divorcing Atlanta, and in summary, on the front of the book, the subtitle of the book is the words between until and death do us part. Until death do us part, and I do, that kill us. It's the words between until and death do us part that kill us. And what the hidden message in that little subtitle is, sometimes it's not the affair, sometimes it's not the other things we see that break people up. Sometimes it's the words that break us apart, the words that we fertilize our relationship, the good and, unfortunately, the bad words that sometimes can either make a relationship grow or destroy it. So my main character is a former pastor, and we meet him on the night in 2020 in the midst of COVID. And this is how the book begins. After I've preached the last sermon I'll ever deliver, I sit in my Audi with my dad's Bible in one hand and a Glock 17 in the other, contemplating how to get away with the robbery. Soon this gun will make me money, will send me to prison, or kill me. My life is now that simple. It was the shortest sermon I've ever preached. I'm sure the 16 people who attended appreciated it, 17 if you counted the pregnant white girl twice. But it's hard to minister on fumes, difficult to unravel the mysteries of the hereafter when you live in the fear of the here and now. I'm full in spirit, but depleted in every other way. When you're going a week without a meal to save money, starvation slithers up your throat. It plays tricks on your mind. You hallucinate. Bones appear in places you've never seen them before. You lick your lips for comfort from time to time out of instinct. But before your tongue can settle in your mouth, your lips are dry and need to be relicked. And then the cramps kick in. That's what abject hunger feels like. After the church service ended, I did something my dad would have called a moral turpitude. I bought a 4-pack of wine coolers. I did so to escape, if only for the moment. All I know to be true is this. When you work this hard to build a church, to be recognized for your endeavors from coast to coast as a new way to launch a ministry, it's not supposed to end this way. This truth I know. This truth I own. I wasn't supposed to be destitute at this point in my life. Wasn't supposed to lose my congregation the way I lost them. And I wasn't supposed to be contemplating doing the unthinkable. Divorcing Atlanta. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it, LaShaunda.
Thank you. That was a deep first few pages there. I'm curious. I am so curious because you said you kind of took a break from writing, and I know I've tried to take a break from writing, and my characters would wake me up at 3 or 4 in the morning and slide me to the bathroom. So I'm wondering, how did your creative side stop? Did it just stop, or did every now and then you get something pop in you?
It hid. Let me tell you what happened. See, as a writer, you can relate to this. They were hiding. What happened was initially, I stopped writing in 2002, and I swear 2002, 3, 4, and 5, the 3 years after I stopped writing, I could not stop those voices. It was kind of like Whoopi Goldberg in the movie Ghost. You know, these characters come. I'm driving down the road, and there's a great story. I'm like, don't write that down, because I know me. I know if I write it down, I'm done. I'm going to be writing. The novel going to come out. So you don't, if you got a cocaine addiction, you don't want to be around nobody doing cocaine. You know your limitations. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't even fooled with it. So I would completely ignore it. But then I started writing things instead of the secular in the spiritual. So I would write down notes from sermons. I would write down things from my holy inspiration. Kid you not, the idea was to write all my thoughts down and put them in one document, one word document. So if I wanted to find something on love, joy, peace, divorce, marriage, separation, I could just type that word in and pull up everything I've written on that subject. That was the master plan. To this day, that document right now, this started in 2005. That document now is 25,000 pages long. You can actually have a Word document with 25,000 pages. So to answer your question, I was writing, didn't even realize I was writing, but those characters and things with inspiration was still coming out of me. They just came out disguised as something else.
Mhm. I wondered that because I thought that I was not going to be a writer. I said I'm going to be a magazine publisher, and that's what I'm going to do. Because I was really scared of getting published, and so I was like, I ain't going to do this. But my creative side was like, I don't care if you never publish these books, we still going to get put down on some paper.
You got to.
When you said 25,000, I totally understand because I'm like, a true writer cannot give it up. You cannot just stop. Even people say they retire. I'm like, you still writing somewhere because that mind is going. It's not going to stop. It's going to put some little tidbits somewhere, or maybe you're going to speak it to somebody else. So I'm happy to hear that. You had a 25,000-page document.
You cannot just cut it off. I used to always tell, I say to my ministers, who want an opportunity that, preachers got to preach, singers got to sing, dancers got to dance, and I'll add to that, writers got to write. You don't, if you don't have to, I used to say this when I was writing before. I don't really talk about it very much now, but when reporters would ask me during the interview, why do you write? My answer was always for the same reason I breathe. You don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. You do it or you cease to be. It's just the bottom line. And you don't do it to get paid. You don't do it to make, write the next bestseller. You write it because those characters won't let you rest, and you got to tell their story, you know. Mm-hmm. So now that I done unleashed the beast, and I done,
his own.
14 books already lined up.
Oh, wow.
I kid you not, for the next 7 years, trying to drop 2 a year, 14 mm-hmm. books. They in order, and every time I see something, it's going into my little notepad. I'm like, oh, I can use that. Like, what, you know, trust mm-hmm. me. The beast is unleashed, and I'm ready to go.
That's good to hear that. I know when I saw that you weren't writing anymore, and I was like, wow, how can you just cut it off like that? How can you not say anything? That's why I said I'm going to ask him that, because I know for myself, even though I hadn't gotten published, I knew those characters was like, I had a dragon that had been driving me for 5 years, and I wrote his story last year, and he was like, hey, yeah, you're not getting off this earth without putting me on some paper.
Little did you know. No, you just have to do it. But it's exhilarating. It's enthralling. I just finished up. I sent Divorcing Atlanta to my editor. She gutted it up and sent it back to me. I'm working on the rewrites as we speak tonight. Mm-hmm. I got 2 more rewrites to go on, and then it's out there. And as soon as I get out there, I do a little bit of PR for it, it's back to the lab. You know, it's back in there working on the next character, because the next character already saying, when you going to get finished, I need you to come. I need you to come and finish me up. Hurry up with that book. I want to get started, man. So you absolutely got to do it. But I love it. There's nothing in the world. You know, I think the reason I love it so much is because there is a level of immortality when you write. You know, just imagine if you could read your great-grandfather's writing. Imagine how you would feel to read what his mind, where his mind was, and what he thought about relationships or business or whatever the subject matter might be. So when you write, those words last long after you're gone. So it's just so exciting, not only writing for myself and for people to hopefully enjoy today, but writing into the future as well.
I love that. I really do. That's how I look at books, as legacies. One of my favorite books growing up was Little House on the Prairie books, and those books are old. You know, but that's my dream. If somebody said, man, one of my authors is LaShaunda Hoffman. She was 200 years ago.
Yeah. You know, that's what it's all about. And those books stay here. They don't bury the books in the grave with you. They're gonna still be. Your voice will still be heard long after you're gone. You know, and that's why I'm very careful about what I write. You know, I don't write. I want to make sure I'm comfortable with it, because what you laugh about and joke about now, one day might bring shame to your children. So you know, I have to be very careful about what I put my name on. You know, because I don't want to bring shame to them or my grandchildren. So yeah. But you're right. There's a heavy responsibility we have as a writer, because you are leaving that legacy.
Yes, I love that. Miss Cynthia, are you ready?
Yes. I'm just enjoying listening. I can relate so much on having to write. I've been writing since I was 7, and I'm a poet, an artist, an editor, and my artist and poet name is Cynthia Rose, and that's the name I chose after sort of a rebirth, and having already published one book in 2013 under my then legal name, Cynthia Lamb. It was a collection of poetry covering over 25 years of my life, and the name of the book is Bloom Forever. It's a poetry journal, and I got married right before I published it, and so I published it with my married name, which was Lamb at the time, and just less than 2 years later, I went through a horrible divorce, and I felt like I had been a slaughtered lamb, and I was like, oh, I can never publish with this name again, because every time I heard it or saw it, I felt like I was being slaughtered all over again. I don't know the symbolism behind it, but you think of the Lamb of God and he takes away the sins of the world, but I'm not Jesus. So I was like, okay, I couldn't wait to get my name back, my legal name, which is Porta Latin. And I was okay with publishing with that name, but I was sitting in my home one morning and I looked up at a canvas print that I had on my wall, and the way the sun hit it, I had been praying and asking God for guidance because I didn't feel like writing anymore. My whole world had shattered. What I thought was a happy forever after marriage ended up being a hell. And it's a long story. I actually wrote a short story about it. This is what writers do. We write about our lives. But I just was asking God what to do because I didn't have a desire to write. And I looked up at this print of a rose that was on my wall. And I had been thinking of a pseudonym, a writer name. And I thought, Cynthia Rose, but not. The rose was pretty, but I didn't want to call myself Rose to be a rose. I looked at the word as a verb. Like, what am I going to do now? What will people say about Cynthia when the dust settles? And what do people tell you to do whenever you fall down? Get back up. So I thought, okay, Cynthia Rose. That is why I chose the name Cynthia Rose. But most people think it's because of the flower and because I also love to draw flowers. And I titled my poetry book Bloom Forever. But the real reason behind my name is because I rose from great despair to write again and live again and be happy again. So with all that said, my book Bloom Forever is a journey of my life and a journey of love and all its ups and downs. And I chose to show the poems just as I wrote them. Because I'm an editor, when my editor asked me to send her a Word document, I kind of freaked out a bit. I was like, no, because if I start typing these in, I'm going to want to change them. The editor in me is going to come out. And I've got poems going, starting from around 17, 18 years old to my mid-40s in this book. There's 115 poems in this book, my whole life up to that point when I published. And I'm not the same person I was last week, let alone 25 years ago. So I said, can we do something different, a little different? Can I just scan the poems in? Some of them are handwritten. I took them out of old diaries and journals. Some of them were typewritten on an old beat-up typewriter. Some of them were nicely formatted on a computer. I've got drawings on some of them, and some of them, the handwriting changes depending on how old I was at the time. I said, I really would like to treat these as images. And she allowed it. She said she would never do it again, but she allowed it. And the reason she said that is because it was difficult to scan them in, being that some were written in different color ink, heavier print, depending on if it was a typewriter or a word processor or a computer. You can tell how old I am by the different technology or lack of in the book. So it took a couple of proofs in order to get it to print to where you could see everything in the book. But I'm really happy with it. And my whole reason for putting the poems in a book was so that my daughter could have something and she could have it all in one place when I pass from this earth. And it's really important. It was really important to me to leave it in a place where she could have it all at once. Even if it doesn't tell my entire life story, it could give her a glimpse into, well, what was Mom like when she first started dating? And then what was it like when she became a mom? And what did she go through in her different careers? And how did she handle death or love or heartbreak? And what was her faith like? And all of that is in this book. And I just wanted to leave a gift for her. Not that I'm dying anytime soon, but we don't know. Our days are numbered, but we don't know. And I lost my mother when I was 5, and I didn't have anything except for some costume jewelry and an old leather purse that my aunt sent me when I turned 18 that she had kept. Unbeknownst to me, my mother was a writer and had left behind letters and just stories that she'd sent into magazines. She always wanted to publish, but I didn't know this until I graduated from college, and my younger sister found these letters in our aunt's home. Now, we didn't grow up together. We were separated through foster care. But my sister got a handle on these letters and made copies of them and sent them to me. And my whole world was like, wow, this is my mother. I finally got to read her words. And I said, well, no wonder I am the way that I am. You know, she was a writer, and I turned out to be a writer. But nobody in my family that I knew or that I grew up with is a writer. So I always felt like the odd person. And then when I finally got to read her letters, everything started to make sense. I was like, this is why I am the way that I am. And so I purposed myself to publish the book and have all my poems in one place for that reason, so that my daughter wouldn't have to wonder, you know, where she comes from. Because, you know, teenagers, they don't want to really listen to their parents. And we were at that point where she was a teenager when I published, and I said, okay, one day when she comes back to Earth and the aliens bring her back to me, she'll want to know, and she'll want to know what Mom was like. So that's why I did that book. But once I published it, it was like, wow, why did I wait so long? And then I had all these ideas for all these other books. And then I had a series of unfortunate crises happen in my life, one being the divorce. My mother died. I had been caretaking for her. She had dementia, and she passed suddenly. I had retired from my job, and I found myself middle-aged and nobody wanting to hire a high-skilled middle-aged person. So I relocated. Then I lost my home as a result of divorce. It's just a lot of things that happened back to back. So I kept putting publishing anything new off, except for a short story, which I published a year after the poetry book, because I was a member of several writing groups, and one of them is a Christian writers group, and we were putting together an anthology. So when we were told, hey, we got to write a short story about the consequences of sin, the only thing I could write about was what I had just experienced through my divorce. And so I wrote a short story in 2014. It came out, and it's titled When Love Hurts, Truth Awaits You on the Other Side, an anthology about the consequences of sin. The book's title is Truth Awaits You on the Other Side. My short story is When Love Hurts, and I have a poem in there as well. So those are the two published items that I have, and I would love to share a poem from the poetry book. But I'm also working on a new book, and it's titled Journey's Light, and I had the vision for this book right after I published my first book, but life kept getting in the way, and I kept postponing it, and I'd go through periods where I didn't want to write, or I would just be editing other people's books or writing screenplays and things for other people. Like all my life I've written for other people in my career. And 2 years ago I said, okay, I'm not getting any younger, and God gave me this book to put together, and if I don't do it, he doesn't need me to do it. He can ask a rock to do something, you know, but won't I feel bad if someone else publishes this book when he gave it to me to publish? So I said, okay, I'm going to release it in 2020. It's a visionary year. Now, this was 2 years ago I told myself this. And when I started working on it, I had the vision for the book was to make it a pictorial book and to include inspirational thoughts. I had traveled a lot, throughout my career in federal government, and I used to work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I had a lot of photos that I had taken during my travels in rural farmland where I'd catch beautiful sunrises and sunsets and lakes and old barns and different crops and fields. And whenever I traveled, I preferred to drive. If it was under 8 hours, I would drive, just so that I could see the beauty of God's creation. And all these photographs that I had taken with my personal camera documented the journey of light through nature. And so I wanted to share those images and include inspirational messages. So I kept working on the messages, and when I finally sat down to put the book together, I could not find my photographs. This was last fall, and I said, oh no, now I'm finally ready, and I don't know where these photos are. I've moved several times, and I thought, well, maybe they got lost in the move, or when my daughter moved out, maybe she took them and didn't realize it. So I let it go. I mourned it for a little bit, and then I said, okay, God, you must have something else for me to do. Well, the person that I'm dating is a photographer. My partner is a photographer, and I was bemoaning to him, and he's like, well, duh, I'm a photographer. I have thousands of photos. What do you want to convey? What do you want to show? And I said, oh, okay, let's collaborate. So we decided to collaborate, and he has way more beautiful photos than I could ever take because he's a professional photographer. And I love how God worked to bring us together to work on this gift that we want to share with the world. And so we're getting ready to release it this month, and it is it's just a journey. In life we all experience journeys, and they take us on many paths and experiences. And the book is meant to inspire you on your journey and encourage you to look for light along the way. As you read the words, we hope that the beautiful imagery inspires you and that you'll think of beauty and joy, faith, forgiveness, gratitude, and hope. And it's quite timely, especially now with what's happening in the world, not only with the pandemic, but with the divisions across racial lines and economic lines. The world is in turmoil, and people want something beautiful and healing. And we're hoping that this book will do that. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm going to go ahead and share one poem from my book, Bloom Forever, which is available on Amazon. Author name is Cynthia Lamb, and Journey's Light will come out under Cynthia Rose in November. And the poem I'm going to read is titled, Putting the Pieces Together. Digits, bits, pieces. Fragments of feelings, memories, Jesus. I love him for what he did for me, dying on Calvary to set my soul free. Yet these memories, feelings, and fragments, they sometimes hit me with lament. These pieces, bits, digits, they nick me and blast me as they hit. And I forget my beauty. I forget I'm free. I'm sometimes a bit lost in my agony. It's when you smile and kiss away my tear that I can find my way back enough to hear, I love you. And the second one I would like to share doesn't have a title. It's an inspirational thought from the book Journey's Light. Sometimes the sun burns like fire, but if you walk further, you'll soon find the water. Let it cool you. Let it soothe you. Let it fill you. let it heal you. You'll then be able to shine your own light, having survived the trials and plight, with wisdom to help you guide others to the light. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were beautiful. I love that. I like that you're leaving something for your daughter. I think that is so special. My mom wanted to be a writer. She kind of put it off. And she had my mom, I took care of my mom too. And so when she passed, I was going through some stuff and I found, I guess it was more like she was using it to record what happens to her when she takes certain medicine and stuff. But she would write little scriptures in there, and then she would write how she was feeling for the day. And it brought me to tears because it was like talking to her, different little things like that.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that was so sweet. She probably wasn't thinking anybody was going to ever read this. This was just when she took this book to the doctor with her, and he would ask her, you know, how was this? Well, how did this affect you? Stuff like that, and she would take it with her. And so I kept it because I said I was going to pass it on to my kids because they were kind of young when she died, and I was like, it's not a lot, but it's just to get a glimpse of somebody on their day. Like she was like, today was a really good day, you know. And I was wow.
Yeah, it's a part of her life. I think that's really special. When I received the copies of letters my biological mother had written, you know, she wrote, some of them were while she was pregnant with me, and then some of them were, you know, further along. I was 5 when she passed, and it validated some of my memories, which my foster mother told me they were figments of my imagination. But I had these memories, and when I read the letters, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I really was sitting on the ledge of a window looking at a brick wall, and she had to pull me back in because I thought I was Spider-Man, and I was going to jump to the brick wall and the building across, and I would have died because we were in an 8-story walk-up, you know. So, you know, but it was so important to have that, and then to know that some of the things that struggles she went through, being in a biracial marriage and living in the heart of New York City, and struggling, you know, financially, and the breakups and the getting back together, and her dreams of wanting to write, and how the world treated women back then in the professional world. You know, she was fired when she was a waitress, and when she started showing her belly, they fired her because they were like, well, you're pregnant, so bye. You know, that's how it was back then. And she would write article after article and letter after letter to magazines, and she had some college. She had a scholarship to college, and she dropped out when she met my dad. He was a musician, but she was very bright. She went on scholarship to Boston University, and so she could write really well, but the only job that they would even consider her for was a secretary, and then after she had 4 kids, it was almost impossible for her to keep a job because she was single a lot of the time. I mean, they would get back together and then break up, and then get back together and break up. So learning that about her, it just was like, wow. And I almost repeated her footsteps because she had majored in journalism. And when I was in college, I switched my major to journalism halfway through, and I was dating a jazz musician. And it's like, oh my gosh, I was like repeating her life until I broke up with the guy and I cut the cycle, the cord, because I later found out that he was abusive. He never was abusive toward me, but he had been abusive to previous and subsequent girlfriends. So there are things that you need to know. You need to know where you come from and who you come from, because you might be reliving history and not even know it. It's so important to know about your ancestors. So I started working on a memoir way back in my 20s, but I would put it down, and now I'm in my 50s, and I feel like I have 3 memoirs in me for different phases in my life, and I want to include both of my mothers, my birth mother and my adoptive mother, and my life in the book to show how we walked through different phases in our lives depending on which decade we were in. And it's probably going to take me another 10 years to finish that one, so I'm not promoting that one here tonight. But I've been writing since I was 7 years old, and my grandmother sent me a little journal, and I started recording everything like a scribe almost. And I would fill up a 1-year journal in like 2 months because I would just write. But no one understood my desire to document everything and write about everything. I would write short stories and little skits and draw comics, and I would show my adoptive mother. Sometimes I would show her what I would write, but she didn't have any interest in it. So I go through phases. If I went through a really major heartbreak, I wouldn't write for a couple of years, and then it just calls you. It's like, there's paper, there's a pen, I got to write. And so that's how it is. I have a million journals. If I hadn't destroyed all the journals I'd written from age 7 to 18, I'd probably have 2 Foot Locker fulls right now. But I got really upset when I found out my mother was reading my journals and that she had scared away my fiance, and really kind of like changed my whole life trajectory. But I didn't find out about it until 2 years after, and I was already in college. I understand, now I'm a mother and I understand, but he wasn't a bad person. She just wanted my life to go in a different direction, I guess. But I was so upset that I just tore all my journals up, and I didn't write for like 2 or 3 years after that. That's how angry I was. But then I realized that the only way I ever felt good was if I could express myself writing. And that was really the only safe space for me to be able to express myself. I wasn't allowed to express myself in my family when I was growing up. And the first husband I married was very controlling, and he didn't allow me to express myself hardly ever either. And it took a long time for me to find myself again after that. But through journaling and poetry and writing, I was able to work through and heal. And I even host workshops. I titled them Write to Heal. And I share how poetry and journaling can be therapeutic. And through writing prompts in a safe space, the group is allowed to write and share if they want. Whatever is shared in that room stays in that room, and they can find healing within themselves. I don't call myself a healer or anything like that. People call me a healer, but I don't call myself that, because I believe, God can heal you, and you can find healing through your faith and through different tools that you use. But I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a psychologist. I just share the tools that have worked for me, and I began to do the workshops after doing lots of poetry readings. I decided to take a year and just do poetry readings and go out to different events and share my book and give it away rather than sell it. And what I found was at almost every event, someone would come up to me after my reading and say, "Oh my gosh, that poem really spoke to me. I'm living this right now." And then I started getting invited to speak at different events, women's groups, different poetry or writer groups. And I thought, whoa, okay, God, what are you doing here? What do you want me to do with this? I don't know what you want me to do. Got a little intimidated. But, if you just ask God, he'll show you. And I started getting downloads on different writing exercises that I could share. And that blossomed into the Write to Heal workshops. And even in the pandemic, which I didn't think I was going to host any, because I do these in person, friends reached out to me and asked me if I would speak during their Zoom writing calls. So I've done two presentations, 2 workshops to college students of all, which I never saw myself doing that. But there's at the university where I work, they were putting together a group of mentees and mentors for international students. And so they had a day on mental health wellness and physical wellness, and they invited me to speak and share about my Right to Heal writing prompts, which was a challenge because I had not prepared anything for Zoom or online. And I know that's where courses have been the direction they were going even before we had the shut-in, lockdown, pandemic situation. A lot of the training and workshops I'd gone to were moving in that direction. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. And yet, it was a friend who called and asked, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I just asked God to show me. I have a book of ideas where when the downloads come, I just scribble them in this book. It's an old journal, and it's full of different ideas for writing workshops and books and all kinds of things. And so I just prayed and I said, Lord, tell me what page to open it to, because I don't know. I have so much, I don't even know where to begin. And when I opened it, there it was, the perfect writing prompts. So I taught the students how to create their own affirmations. I only had 10 minutes for the first workshop, and I thought, oh, Lord, how am I going to condense a 3-hour workshop into 10 minutes? But if you will just allow yourself to be used, God will use you. You don't have to know everything. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in 2020 is, I always feel like I have to know everything before I present. I got to know everything, and then I'll feel comfortable presenting or doing or teaching or writing. But you don't. You know what you know, and you let God use it for the rest. You prepare, obviously, but no one can know everything. No one can know everything. But if you share what you do know, it will help someone, and that's what I hope that my writing does. I never thought that I would be doing what I'm doing now, but I'm so happy that I am, because I finally feel like I'm in my element and I'm doing something that I was called to do, and I feel good about it. For 20 years, I wrote for other people. I was working in public relations for federal government agencies, and I worked as a journalist prior to that. And you never feel like what you write is yours. You're writing someone else's story. And now I finally get to share lessons I've learned, insights God's giving me, inspirational words. And I get to share my story, and it's helping others find healing. So I'm really excited about Journey's Light. And Lord willing, it will come out in November. We've experienced a few delays, but they're good delays. Just lots of projects, creative projects in the works. So I don't have a link to share with you other than my book is on Amazon, but I do have a website where you can find out a little more about me. It's called Creative Words, the number 4, and then the word light, creativewordsforlight.com, and that will tell you a little more about things I do.
Well, thank you.
I hope I didn't talk too long. I can get a little long-winded sometimes.
No time limits. I just say, Cynthia, you have Rose. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
we're going to go to Miss Aziza and see what she has to say about herself and her book.
Good evening, everyone. I am today Aziza Sphinx. LaShaunda has been around me long enough to know that I am more than one person, but today or tonight, I am Aziza Sphinx. I am a techie by trade. I am a writer by necessity, 100% Georgia Peach, born and raised. I have been writing professionally long-form type fiction for about 20 years. I started out as a lyricist. I worked in the music industry for more years than I'll ever discuss with anyone. And eventually I started writing long-form fiction. Under the name Aziza Sphinx, I write black speculative fiction, so I do science fiction, fantasy. I have some stories that are a combination of those genres. I do some horror, and then I like to do fairy tale retellings, either from a black perspective or combining and just, in general, remaking fairy tales and traditional mythology. Like most other writers and the other people have said here tonight, I write because I have to. And again, writing is a necessity. I very much do as I'm told, and in order to maintain my sanity. And that's just kind of the balance that I've negotiated with my characters. So the most recent novel that I have is set to be released on Saturday, so October 31st. It is called A Licentious Storm. It is a steamy paranormal romance, though it does have some urban fantasy elements to it and a little bit of mystery and suspense. In general, it is about a woman who is restarting her life after escaping a abusive relationship. And in doing so, she kind of picks up and entirely leaves to rebuild in a brand new place. And in doing so, during that process, she discovers information about her past and about her family's past that she wasn't aware of because she had been adopted. So it's kind of the journey with that, but it's also how those things that sometimes people don't know from their past history, their family history, how those things can come back and will need to be faced and dealt with and processed in order to heal. So I'll read a little excerpt from the beginning of the book. The first part of the book is called The Prelude to the Storm, so this is kind of the setup to the main part of the book, A Licentious Storm. And this part is actually from the perspective of the guy who she's going to end up with. So let's see. Smoke-filled room, check. Free-flowing liquor, check. Music so loud it obscured every thought racing through his head with the hypnotic cadence of a live band, check. Tired couldn't begin to explain the aching and emptiness weighing on Nehemiah. He downed half of his current shot. The burn of the liquid reminded him that he was still alive, or as close to alive as his bond with his master allowed. Drowning yourself in bourbon? Really, Nehemiah? I expected more of you after all these years. Nehemiah cut his eye at the redhead easing into the seat next to him. He'd chosen the booth in the back, tucked away in the corner against the far wall and the bar. A booth shrouded in darkness, the flickering of a soon-to-burn-out bulb casting an eerie glow from time to time before it succumbed to a low, pulsing hum. Valencia. Emptying the glass, he carefully placed it on the table. Better than that tasteless vodka you find so enjoyable. Bad day, she replied with a smirk in her voice. What tipped you off? He gestured for the bartender to send over another shot. Instead, 2 glasses and the remainder of the bottle appeared before them, the waitress tipping her head as she placed the items on the table and sauntered away. Nehemiah noticed the curve of the woman's hips, the soft roundness of her behind, the way her waist narrowed, accentuated by the pink sequence band breaking the plane of black created by her bodysuit. The clanking of glass drew his attention away from wicked thoughts, back to his visitor. Valencia had poured him another shot. She tapped his hand away as he reached for the glass. Why pour if you aren't going to let me drink? Because you need something stronger. Think your day has been bad so far? You're wholly unprepared for what I need to tell you. He watched as she drew a vial of glowing blue liquid from the folds of flesh between her breasts. He remembered their softness under his fingertips, the way her body reacted when his warm breath tickled her skin. Stop, Nehemiah. Her words slapped him out of the trance, his mouth closing in the process. Had he been drooling? And worst of all, had she been feeling what he was feeling? Silently, she allowed 3 drops of the liquid to fall into his drink. 3. A definitive number in their world where the binding of triads signified the beginning, the middle, and the end for those powerful enough to create and sustain the connection. Though only 2 of their 3 remained together, his master still maintained the balance in the physical absence of the 3rd of their triad. Who gave you access to the source? He'd seen the liquid before in what his master called a haven. It looked like a giant chalice, large enough to submerge 3 sizable adults. From what Nehemiah had gathered, eavesdropping on his masters and the other of her kind, the source maintained them in their original realm, the home of their race, the Doridian. When they crossed over through the Devil's Triangle, the ones that found them here named them vampire. And so that's the beginning of the Prelude to the Storm, which is the beginning of a licentious storm.
I'm curious, why did you choose this genre to write about?
I do as I'm told. I have no choice. I have no say. I literally do as I'm told. The characters speak to me. Sometimes it's repeating the same line over and over and over until I bow down and write, lest I won't be able to function in the real world.
So we all have the same issues then. That's good to know.
I don't see it as an issue.
We're not crazy.
We're
really not crazy.
The way things are.
These characters really do talk to each of us. All right, I have one last question for you. If you could start your writing career again, what 3 things would you do differently? Start with Timothy.
3 things I would do differently. Number 1, I'd be patient with myself. You know, good writing, I won't say great writing, but good writing sometimes is seasoned with time. I couldn't be the writer I am today at 25 years old. And so I wouldn't be upset if everything didn't come out the way I wanted it to come out. Secondly, I would lean into mentors, people who had done it before me, people who would lend me their ear, people who could give me a lot of information about not only the writing, but also about the business of writing as well. And number three, I would listen even closer to my characters. Getting out the way of a story can sometimes be very difficult because you want to bring sometimes your own truth to it. But I find that when I have gotten out of the way of the characters, that's when great things happen. It's like when you write late at night and then you wake up the next day and you read and you go, oh, my God, that came out of me. And to get to that place is when you have removed yourself from being in front of the camera. So I think those are the 3 things that I would do.
They're really good 3 things. Being patient is so hard as a writer. I want to finish the book now. I want to publish it now. I want to sell now. So yes.
Oh yeah.
So hard.
Oh, most definitely.
So
and
hard.
then you mess around and read somebody like James Baldwin or Toni Morrison or Richard Wright, and you want to just break your pencil up and say, you know what, forget that. I ain't never going to do it like that. You want to curse the paper out and everything, you know. But James Baldwin didn't start out as James Baldwin, you know, and Tony didn't start out as Tony. You know, there was a seasoning period, and we only see them on top of the mountain. So just be okay with the journey. Don't worry about the destination. The destination is going to handle itself. Just focus on the journey. Try to get better and better every day. And trust me, it'll happen. Your writing will get better. I believe this is some of my best. No, scratch that. The book I'm writing now is by far my best book. And I didn't plug my book, my website, Pastor Timothy, Pastor TIMMOTHY.com, PastorTimothy.com. But my writing now is far superior than what it was 18 years ago. So just be patient.
I like that. Thank you. I always tell people there's a season. There is a season for you. You just got to get through it. So, yeah. What about you, Cynthia?
Oh, wow. Well, I think I've always been patient with my writing, but what I would have done is shared it sooner. But I was very self-conscious because my poetry is deeply personal, and I didn't want to show it to anyone. Whenever I did share it, people would cry. People would say, oh, my gosh, you have to publish this. But I never would want to share it because I doubted myself. And I didn't want people to read all about everything I was going through and living through. So if I had to do it over again, I would have shared it. I would have pursued writing creatively rather than writing for newspapers and government agencies. I would have pursued writing stories sooner, and I would have published some of my work in a book format sooner, because I had published in newspapers and magazines, but didn't publish a book until I was in my 40s, which is okay. I mean, I've read, some great writers didn't start till their 50s, 60s, or 70s. So if God allows me to live a long and fruitful life, I've got a lot of more books in me. I think the third thing, I would have joined writer groups a lot sooner as well. I joined my first real writers group in 2009, and it was because of that I published. I finally felt like I was around people like me, and I wasn't the odd one out. It's like, oh, there are other weird people just like me who have these things in their head. Like, I wake up with essays in my head, and I have to write them down as soon as I wake up. I wake up and there are dreams and messages that come through my dreams, and I write them down. I never knew other people who did that until I joined writer groups. And then I was in a safe space to share and also encouraged to grow and learn. We bring other accomplished writers in and publishers and editors. I learned so much by being in these local writing groups, and it taught me about different genres. And even though I had been an avid reader all my life, it's totally different when somebody critiques your work and they're doing it constructively, and it helps you grow. And so I wish I had done that in my 20s instead of my 40s, because I probably have 50 books by now. But it's okay. God's timing is perfect. So you start where you're at, right? You work with what you have. Yeah. But I I encourage younger writers. I'm always encouraging them. When I put together poetry readings, I invite wannabe, writers who they're like, well, I write a little bit, but I've never published, and I don't consider myself a writer. I'm like, if you write, you're a writer. If you write poetry, you're a poet. Come on, you're going to share. And then it's so awesome to see them just start to bloom, like once they get that positive reinforcement and feedback, and they start writing more. And I love to encourage beginning writers to grow in their craft. I wish I had that when I was younger, but I just didn't tell people I was doing it. I probably would have if I'd shared. So if you write, join a group, other writers and share your work. That's it. That's how you grow.
Yes, that is so true. I love that. I am a big fan of writing groups that you feel safe in. You have to feel safe in for you to be able to learn and for you to grow. You know, we especially as people of color, we have that because most writer groups usually aren't people of color. So if you can find a group that you feel safe in, no matter what the races are, then you will bloom. And I can say I started a group myself, and those ladies pushed me, encouraged me, and I know I'm published because of them. So I do believe that you have to find a place that you feel safe so you can grow.
Yeah, most
Aziza,
definitely.
I don't know that I have an answer to that, and here's why. I have spent, well, I mean, if I had to give an answer, it would be that I would not be suckered into publishing. For me, writing, being a writer and being an author are mutually exclusive. I will always be a writer. I might not necessarily always be an author, and there's intent behind that. But I've spent my entire life, anything that I've done has always been very intentional. I'm an old soul. I've always been an old soul. That's been validated through my family. And so, I do what I do for me. I've been like that pretty much all my life. So, the whole, I wish I could have done things differently. I have two very clear regrets in my entire life. Everything else has been a very intentional and clearly understood process. And I am wholly okay with that. And so I don't know that there's anything that I would do as far as my writing and my publishing and all of that differently because, things come when it's time for them to come. And decisions are made. And again, because I worked in the music industry for way too many years, I actually have a degree in music industry. So a lot of the challenges that people face on the publishing side, not necessarily on the writer side, but on the publishing side, I think were less impacted on me because I had spent so many years reading and writing them contracts. So, a lot of the business stuff I knew from my years in the music industry. So I don't have any regrets. I don't have anything that I would necessarily change there because, again, it was a very intentional process and intentional decision. And even like my very first contract was with a traditional publisher, and they was mad at me because I rewrote that whole contract, and I was like, look, this is what it is. But I was okay with it because the publishing wasn't what was important to me. I'd have walked away. I would have been more than happy. My agent was kind of hot with me about saying that, but it is what it is. That's not why I'm in this. Again, I write for my sanity. I do as I'm told so that I can continue to function in the real world. So, I don't know that I really have an answer aside from, for any, just maybe advice would be for anybody getting into this, have a clear understanding of, number one, why you're doing this, and understanding that if your intent in doing this is to create a sustainable career that is your sole means of income, then the decisions that you make will reflect that. How much you invest in learning the business, how much you invest in learning the process, how much you invest in your time. Because, when you approach this from a perspective of it being your sole means of income, then you're going to have to not just do the business stuff, even if you have a traditional publisher, but you're also going to have now a much more defined timeline of when you have to create. And that didn't work for me. That was one thing I knew up front why I didn't necessarily want to go the traditional route. Like I said, I got suckered into that, but, I took my money and ran. But, knowing up front what that expectation was going to be, and knowing that that wasn't going to work for me or my characters. I can clearly look at the things that my characters wrote versus the things that, because I had a deadline, I was being forced to write, and you can clearly see the difference. I'm not the writer. My characters are the writer. And so if you want to continue to have that particular voice, then you have to understand that don't ask me to write anything from January to June. We can work on the business stuff all day long. We can plan the whole year out during that time. But that's usually not when they talk to me. So be clear that the output you're going to get is going to be an entirely different voice than what you would get later on in the year when the character's writing it. So be mindful if you're going to really commit to this as being a long-term business venture and, again, your sole income, that there are a lot of things you're going to have to sacrifice. There are a lot of things you have to learn, and, you have to weigh your options and make your decision based off of those factors.
That was some good advice, because a lot of people don't think that way. They sell that first book, and they're so excited, and they don't think about that maybe they took 5 years to write that book. You're not going to get 5 years to write the second book, and so you have to know how long does it take you to write a book. A lot of people don't think about that. They're just so eager to get an agent, to get a publisher. When you self-publish, you have to look at a lot of stuff like that. You have to know what is your writing calendar? How can you sit down and write in 30 days, or does it? I have a friend that says she's a slow writer. It takes her a year and a half to write a book, but she knows that. So she knows how to tell her fans that, who to go look at while she's writing. You have to know a lot of stuff that, and I'm glad you said this, because most people don't talk about that side of it. Getting ready for what happens after that book is published. The timelines, the stuff that goes in the contract. Is that in your contract that you go take 4 months, or they saying they want it in a month? People don't think about stuff like that. They're just so excited to sell that book. And I always tell people, research, talk to people, listen. One of the best things for me has been publishing a magazine, because I could ask every question I had about writing, editing, publishing, whatever, for people. So, when my book came out, I was not a confused person. I knew what I had to do, what I couldn't do, and, I know why I didn't sell as many books as I wanted to sell, because I didn't do what I was supposed to do, And so you have to know those things up front, and a lot of people don't. So I'm glad that you didn't have anything, but you gave us some excellent advice, because we really needed to hear that. I would like to thank our guests for sharing with us today. Man, we had some good nuggets in here today. I hope you guys took some great notes. Come back and listen to the replay. Believe me, some good nuggets was in here. Can you please tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you online one last time, please?
Sure. This is Timothy McCann. Once again, thank you so very much for the invitation. They can reach out and touch me at Timothy McCann. That's TIMMOTHY, Pastor Timothy McCann at PastorTimothyMcCann.com. PastorTimothyMcCann.com. Thank you so very much.
Hi, and this is Cynthia Rose. You can find my website at creativewordsforlight.com. That's CreativeWords, the number 4, LIGHT.com. I'm also on Facebook as Cynthia Rose, and I'm on Instagram as Creative Words for Light. So you can find me and all those places. Thank you.
And I am author Aziza Sphinx. The best place to find me is to start from my website, which is azizasphinx.com. That's AZIZASPHINX.com. And from there, you can actually get to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I'm Aziza Sphinx in all of those places.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank our sponsor, Tickle My Tummy by Ann Clay. Laughing not only lightens your spirit, but it also lengthens your life. Tickle My Tummy delights in the small, easy to laugh at, hilarious, and sometimes ridiculous things people do and say. Stories of family, relationships, work, and yes, church sets the pace for a few moments of enjoyment. This collection is broken down into Love is in the Air, Family Feud, Going to the Church, Women Rule, The Things Kids Say, Just Plain Old or Stupid, and It's a Pet Thing. These delightful snippets will definitely add bubbles to your day. Get ready to laugh out loud at some of the most commonplace stories of ordinary people, relationships, situations, and living the best life. If you need some laughter in your life, download this book. Check the show notes for the link to order your copy. I want to thank you, our listeners, for taking time to listen to the podcast. I have 3 questions for you. 1, did you enjoy this episode? If you did, subscribe to the platform you're listening to so you don't miss an episode. Number 2, what did you think of the episode? Tell us by writing a review on the platforms you're listening to or send to onestormag@gmail.com. 3, did you learn something from this episode? If you did, please share the podcast with your community. If you have a topic or would like to be a guest or sponsor for an episode, contact me at onestormag@gmail.com. One last question. Have you promoted your book or business today? If you haven't, go showcase those wings. Someone needs what you have to offer. This is LaShaunda Hoffman, and I will see you on the net.